Now, the Syrian government is battling rebels who reportedly seized the airport and also key installations in the country's second largest city of Aleppo. The rebels have seized the Aleppo airport. They've broken through the government defense lines in the strategic town with very little resistance. The Syrian army claims that dozens of its soldiers have been killed in this lightning offensive. And our next report tells you as to how the surge in fighting has opened yet another violent front in West Asia.
The 13-year-old civil war in Syria has resurfaced, this time with a fierce rebel offensive in Aleppo, Syria's ancient business hub and current second largest city. The onslaught comes in the backdrop of months of Israeli strikes on Syrian and Hezbollah targets in the area and the ceasefire in Lebanon. The push by the rebels is the strongest in years and the first opposition attack since 2016. Pushing back the rebel advance, the Russian Air Force launched aerial attacks in Aleppo and Idlib provinces. The counter-offensive is a continuation of Russia's all-out military campaign that helped Syrian President Bashar Assad retake the northwestern city. The Russian naval base in Tartus, nearly 280 kilometers from Aleppo, has not only helped the Syrian government to keep rebels at bay, but has expanded Moscow's military foothold in the Mediterranean region. Russia has stationed nearly 11 warplanes, including nuclear-powered ones, at its base. For its military campaign in the past, the intervention by allies Russia, Iran and Iranian allied Hezbollah and other groups had allowed Assad to reclaim over 70% of the country after the devastating Syrian civil war. But the rest of the country is still controlled by a range of opposition forces and foreign troops. The US has about 900 troops in northeast Syria, far from Aleppo. Turkey, on the other hand, has forces in Syria. Syria accuses it of backing a broad alliance of opposition forces that are currently storming Aleppo. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, known by its initials HTS, is leading the attack on Aleppo. The US and UN have long designated it as a terrorist organization. Abu Muhammad al-Golani emerged as the leader of Al-Qaeda's Syria branch in 2011 in the first months of the Syrian war. Over the years, Golani and HTS have promoted civilian government in their territory as well as military action. After severing ties with Al-Qaeda in 2016, Golani has cracked down on some extremist groups in his territory, portraying himself as a protector of other religions. HTS has also allowed some armed groups to continue to operate on its territory, causing trouble for Assad government. The surge in fighting has raised the prospect of another violent front reopening in the Middle East. This at a time when US-backed Israel is fighting Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, both Iranian allied groups. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what is unfolding at this moment in Syria, we are being joined by Mr. Omer Uzil Kizilchik, who is a non-resident fellow for the Syria project in the Atlantic Council's Middle East program, and he's joining us on this broadcast. Now, Omer, tell us what is happening at this moment in Syria. What has sparked off this sudden uprising that has taken place by this particular group that goes by the name Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? Is it backed by Turkey?
First of all, this offensive was not only launched by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, but by all of the Syrian rebels. So it's a vast coalition of all rebel forces opposing the Assad regime, ranging from a more democratic leaning to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And when the Syrian rebels initially planned for this offensive 6 weeks ago, Turkey opposed this. But only after the Turkish negotiations with the Assad regime to normalize the relations and to put forward a peace process in Syria failed. And the Assad regime proved unwilling to discuss any path forward for peace. Turkey apparently gave the green light. So Turkey is not directly involved, but one can clearly assess that Turkey has given the green light for the Syrian rebels to advance. as many Turkish-backed Syrian rebels are on the forefront of this offensive. Secondly, initially the expectation was much more limited. As the name of the operation suggests, this was more of a warning message initially. However, the Assad regime's defensive lines collapsed so fast and so quick that it turned out to a total mess for the Assad regime. The Syrian opposition, the Syrian rebels, were able to advance far beyond their expectations, and they advance as fast as they can drive. There is almost no resistance from the Assad regime anymore after an initial fight of 3 days. Once the Syrian rebels entered Aleppo city, we have seen that the Assad regime and Iran-backed Shia militias and the Russian Air Force were unable to change the balance of power in Syria anymore. And now the Syrian rebels almost reached one of the biggest towns in Syria as well, another one, Hama city.
Right.
So after Aleppo, they are going also now for Hama. So this is something unbelievable, and no one would have expected this to happen. And we see here that we have here three main lessons to take why no one expected this, including the Syrian opposition. The Russians, due to the invasion of Ukraine, are much more weaker in Syria than anyone anticipated.
Right.
The Iranians are much more weaker in Syria due to the Israeli escalation with Israel than anyone expected. And lastly, the Assad regime is much more weaker than anyone expected due to years of misgovernance and mismanagement at a bad, troubling economy.
You know, you're right in your assessment when you say that the Russians are caught up in Ukraine. The Iranian influence in Syria is on the wane at this moment because of what is happening with Hezbollah. But the obvious question is this: what does Turkey have to gain by green signaling the opposition forces that are now carrying out this offensive? And they're also backed by a few other nations as well, such as the United States of America, which backs the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are another rebel group that's fighting there.
So to make things clear for you, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the YPG-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces, are a Kurdish militant group which is the Syrian branch of the PKK, a designated foreign terrorist organization. However, that being said, the U.S. differentiates between its main branch and the Syrian branch and works with the Syrian branch in Syria. So the US-based YPG was actually trying to withhold against the rebel offensive. They have colluded with the Assad regime, with the Iran-based Shia militias and Russia. The Russian Air Force have directly aided them in opposing the offensive of the Syrian rebels. However, even their attempts, even them getting involved in trying to protect the Assad regime was not enough to stop the rebels at once. And now the Turkish-backed rebels and other Syrian rebels are advancing despite the cooperation between Iran, Russia, the US-backed YPG, and the Assad regime. So Syria is a complex mess, unfortunately.
No, it is a very complex mess. That is true. But my question is obviously this. But backing these rebellious forces, what does Turkey stand to gain? That was my question.
Yeah, what does Turkey stand to gain? The first and most important thing is it changed the entire calculus in Syria. Turkey has tried for almost 2 years now to normalize with Assad regime and to find a path forward for a political solution. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And I think that Damascus is now quite upset that they have not positively responded to the Turkish offer. Secondly, Turkey has a huge pressure on itself domestically due to the Syrian refugee population. As things stand now, after things will calm down in Syria somehow, and after the city of Aleppo and surroundings, and probably even Hama, as it appears, are being controlled by Syrian rebels, we will see a huge refugee return from Turkey to Syria.
Right.
As most of the Syrian refugees inside Turkey are from Aleppo city, and Aleppo city has the potential, the capability to host people. It has an infrastructure, it has housing, it has an economy ongoing, and it was actually, in pre-war time, the economic heartland of Syria.
All right, we'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ömer Özel Kizilcik, for joining us and getting us those details there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.